Hello. To those of you who don't believe that Jesus Christ is divine, consider that we have evidence that is written in the stars. And I'm going to present some of that to you today in this live open forum. So it's going to be pretty exciting. We're going to talk about some of the ancient evidence that we have to support Jesus's birthday and also to support the timing of his crucifixion. Now, the birthday we estimate is September 11th of the year 3 BC. And the timing of his crucifixion, we estimate, is April 3rd of 33 AD. So stay tuned. It's pretty exciting stuff when you think about it. Well, alrighty then. So I've got another screen that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. And if you're a doubting person, you'll have to consider this because this is really compelling evidence that we have in support of Jesus in the stars. And so other people have discussed this before. I'm not the first to talk about this. We're going to see a video from somebody who well articulates exactly what's going on. But we're also going to talk about some people such as Michael Heiser and Sentinel Apologetics, Rob Rowe, and who's the third one? Brant Petrie. So those people have also talked about some of these same sorts of topics. And so this is just really interesting stuff that I'm about to share with you. So here we go. This person's name is Joe Amaral. And so he's going to share some great stuff.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present facts to you that you can't argue with because they're facts. But you can argue with the interpretation of those facts. So that's going to be left open to you. But I'm going to give you dates, names, and precise moments in history where things in the sky lined up that actually happened at the exact same time Jesus was born, that he was crucified, and that he rose from the dead. So you can argue with my conclusion, but you can't argue with the actual data itself. 2 + 2 is 4, and that's it. And what I want you to do when I'm finished is I want you to go home and Google the information. I don't want you just to take me at my word this morning. I want you to go online and I want you to do your own research. When I give you a date that something happened, go check it out and you're going to find that it's absolutely 100% correct. And so this morning, I want to present from an astronomical perspective, not astrological, astronomical, that Jesus truly is the Messiah, the Savior of the world, and the soon coming King. So are you ready to learn something new this morning? Yeah? All right. Now, are we okay if I start by saying that Jesus wasn't actually born on December 25th? Like, are we okay with that? We understand that we didn't know the day, so the early church picked a day to commemorate the birth, and it's wonderful. Merry Christmas, do all that wonderful stuff. But it's not the actual day, but it's a day of commemoration. We understand that? When you look up in the night sky, you don't see the constellation of Santa Claus, right? And the Bethlehem star didn't line up with Rudolph's nose or anything like that, okay? But we are going to talk about constellations this morning, and some of you are going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. and that's good. Because what's going to come out of that discomfort, I believe, is new and fresh revelation. So let's go. Most of you don't know me. You don't know my background, and I'm not going to bore you with the details. But suffice it to say that for the last 20, almost 4 years, I've been in full-time ministry. I've been traveling around the world for the last 14, 15 years, teaching and preaching in churches. And when I came to the end of teaching what I have been teaching, I woke up from a very bizarre dream. Now, has anybody here ever had a bizarre dream?
Yes.
Nobody, just me. No, I want to see hands. Okay, all right. I'm Portuguese. We use our hands. We're very expressive. Have you guys seen that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding? I thought you said nobody watched movies in your church. You just prayed and had Bible study. But anyways, that's my life story. Like, I'm Portuguese. We have 2 volumes, right? Loud and louder. That's it. There's nothing below. So please, interact with me. So you've had bad dreams or crazy dreams, and you wake up in the morning and you say, what in the world was that all about? Like, was God speaking to me? Or, was it the late night tacos I had? What in the world was going on? And I woke up and I had this bizarre dream, and I was so embarrassed to tell people because it was so different. And so when I woke up, I told my beautiful wife, who was lying next to me, and I said, honey, I got to share this dream with you. And this Tuesday, 2 days from now, it's going to be our 25th wedding anniversary. And so for 25 years, this woman's been with me. And I share with her my dream. And with all the love she can muster, she said to me, honey, please don't tell anybody that dream. She says, that's weird. She says, you've been traveling around the world telling the church that Jesus wasn't a Christian, that he was a Jew. That's already strong enough. Now you're going to be talking about this stuff? Please be careful. So I have this dream, and I'm looking up at the night sky, and I see the image of a woman. I don't know who the woman is, but I know that she's in trouble. That's all I get from the dream. And then stage 2 of the dream, another image appears beside this woman. And the woman's up in the sky, by the way. That's weird, right? To see a floating woman in outer space? Are you still glad you came this morning? Right? Thank you for laughing. It makes me feel so welcome. And then beside this woman, I see another image, and it's a dragon. A huge, multi-headed dragon, bright red in color. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I wake up. And when I wake up, I hear 3 words: check the constellations.
What's really interesting that he's about to get into is he's going to talk about lots of references in the Bible to the constellations, though we somehow don't pay that much attention in some cases to astronomy. Astronomers have been studying the stars for years, and he's going to go into a bit of detail about that. But the verse that he is going to find and reference in just a little bit is this one in Revelation 12, 1-6. It says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who is to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Now, what's really interesting is the woman is wrapped in the sun, and the moon is under her feet, which may be drawing our attention to what appears in the day versus the night. The Bible has indicated in numerous places that darkness and night are associated with evil, while light and day are associated with Jesus. Could be symbolizing life's victory over darkness. But there is even more, and it's really interesting. And this gentleman is going to get into that right now. I want you to notice, though, that the idea of the birth and the woman, Protestants don't talk about this so much, but people like Brant Petrie, who's a Catholic Jew, they reference Mother Mary and the birth of Jesus, of course, and they speak to the woman as being the Queen Mother, which is really interesting because it goes back to Gabara, which is a reference towards Solomon and his Queen Mother, and the importance of the Queen Mother in the past. And the fact that the woman is a queen with a crown on her head indicates the importance of a Queen Mother. And so I think that that's another very interesting reference. But let's continue.
Check the constellations. Well, hang on a second. Constellations are zodiacs like Virgo and Leo and Sagittarius and Gemini and all of these weird things. This can't be God speaking to me. God would not tell me to look at the zodiacs, right? But yet I hear, check the constellations. Now that voice spoke to me and told me to marry the woman beside me. That voice told me to go into full-time ministry. That same voice told me to go to Bible college, to become a pastor, to go to Israel, to write a book, to do TV. I know this voice. And now this voice is telling me to check the constellations. I'm like, God, this better be you, because I cannot step into the doors of a church and start talking to them about constellations unless you're in this. So I'm scouring the internet, looking for some kind of connection, and I see nothing. And then I get the sense, just check the Bible. Do you think the Bible talks about zodiacs? What do you think? People are afraid to answer? Yes or no? I got a couple no's, a couple of yeses. Actually, you know what? The Bible talks a lot about constellations, or what we call zodiacs. Now, when I say the word zodiac, Christians cringe because zodiac is associated with astrology, but a zodiac in Greek simply means zodiakos, something that moves in a circle. That's all it is. They look in the night sky and they saw these constellations moving. So zodiakos. So there's nothing bizarre. I just wanted to set that straight. Well, imagine my surprise when I came to the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. So I'm looking through the Bible, trying to find something that'll make sense of these crazy images I saw. And I was so thankful that I wasn't the only one who saw this, that John saw this 2,000 years ago on the Isle of Patmos. This is years later, after the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus. He's exiled to the island, and John says, a great what appeared in heaven? A great sign. Now, one of the Greek words for sign is zodiakos, something that moves in a circle. John says he looked up and he saw a great sign. And there in the heavens appeared a woman who was clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. What in the world is John seeing? You see, we spiritualize what he's seeing. The woman is Israel, or maybe the woman is the church, or maybe it's the Holy Spirit, maybe the woman is the future. It can be all these things. But let me give you another theory, another plausible explanation. What if the woman that John sees in the sky, that he says is a sign, what if it actually is a constellation or a zodiac symbol? There's only one symbol that's a female, and that's the constellation of Virgo. So John says, now from that first verse, I can tell you when Jesus is born. Do you believe me?
It's really interesting. So just note, as far as Virgo, so Virgo runs from August 23rd to September 22nd each year. So at that time period is when we can see the constellation of Virgo, because the way that the earth revolves around the sun, that's the part of the universe that we can witness at that particular time.
Nope. Stay with me. From this verse, I can tell you when Jesus is born. You know why? Because John has given us coordinates. He's given us a date. You don't realize this, but when you look into the night sky, right, the constellations change every month. Because as we're on our trajectory around the sun in our orbit, we're looking at different parts of space. So every month we're seeing a different part of space. So whatever time of the year it was the time where this constellation, Virgo, was in the sky. So right away, we have a time frame. We can rule out 10 or 11 other months because Virgo's only there for a certain part of the year. And then John gets a little more specific. He says the woman, which has to be Virgo, it's the only female, says the woman was clothed with the sun. What does that mean? That means that when he looked up into the sky, he saw the constellation, she was clothed in the sun was passing through that constellation. Now we're narrowing down the day because only a few days a year does the sun pass through the center of Virgo. And then John gets even more specific and he says, and then the moon was under her feet. That happened once for 80 minutes. We have Virgo in the sky, we have the sun passing through, and then we have the moon passing under the feet of Virgo. It only happens for 80 minutes. All of a sudden, John is narrowing in on a very specific time in history. Now, is this too much for everybody? You guys are really quiet this morning. Are you taking it in?
Okay, so I'm just going to read you a little bit about what Michael Heiser said about a lot of this stuff. So Michael Heiser, in his book, Reversing Herman, here's what he says. He says, of the 12 zodiac signs, the only one that represents a woman is Virgo, which appears in the sky between August 23rd and September 22nd of each year. In other words, as the earth this is actually from my book, but I'm going to read the quote from Michael in just a moment. In other words, as the earth revolves around the sun over a 365.2422 day period, we see the constellations represented in the zodiac in the time slots in which they are visible to us. Here's what Michael Heiser says. The only time in the year that the sun could be in a position to clothe the celestial woman called Virgo, that is to be mid-bodied to her, in the region where a pregnant woman carries a child, is when the sun is located between about 150 and 170 degrees along the eclipse. This clothing of the woman by the sun occurs for a 20-day period each year. The sun must be in the Virgin constellation while the moon is simultaneously at her feet for John's vision to be accurately interpreted astronomically. Because of the moon's behavior relative to the ecliptic and Virgo in any given year, the window narrows to a roughly 90-minute period. Now, Mr. The Joe Amaral said to an 80-minute period, so it could be debated if it's 80 or 90 minutes. Then he adds, the combination of astronomical signs, which Heiser does detail at length in his book, produces a unique set of circumstances that can only be accounted for by one date, September 11th of 3 BC. Now, we've got numerous ancient sources that have dated Jesus's birth to between 2 or 3 BC. So we've been able to narrow this down a bit. And also, of course, you know that when Jesus started his ministry, Luke tells us that he was around 30. So here we go.
Okay. Who said wow? Okay, come here, a free video for you too. Just this side of the room tonight. I don't know what's happening today. There you go. Blu-ray, DVD, digital copy. Enjoy it, sir. God bless you. Who else would like a copy of the film? $20 on the back table. Debit, credit. Okay. Now it continues. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Some of you are still looking at me saying, I don't get the whole constellation thing, Joe. That doesn't make sense to me. Well, let's go back to the beginning, to Genesis chapter 1. Verse 14, this is God speaking. God said, let there be what? Lights. Lights are celestial objects like suns, moons, stars, constellations, galaxies. So God says, let there be celestial objects, these lights in the vault of the sky, to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as what? Come on, what does it say? Let them serve as? Okay, what are signs? Zodiacals, constellations. So God says these constellations, they're going to serve as signs to do what? 3 things. To mark sacred times, days, and years. So let's evaluate. What would be a sacred time that's so important that God would align things in the heavens as a sign for us? Do you think the birth of the Son of God would qualify as a sacred time? Okay. What about the crucifixion or the death of that same Son to redeem mankind? Would that be a sacred time? What about the resurrection from the dead to prove he has the power over death and hell? Would that be a sacred time? What if I told you in the next 30 minutes or so, I can show you on each of those days, there was cosmic signs in the heavens. And the Bible even says it, but we don't even see it. You see, Virgo is the only female in the original 12 signs. And no matter what language you go into, to the ancient calendars of the Syrians, the Greeks, the Hebrews, the Mesopotamians, Babylonians, North Africa, China, everywhere you go, everybody has the same symbol for Virgo. She's always a woman, and she always has a branch in her right hand, and in every single culture, she's called the Virgin. Interesting what Isaiah says, that behold, one day the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. And if you notice in her right hand, she's holding a branch. And at least 4 times in the Bible, the branch is a direct reference to God himself. Do you understand what that means? The prophecy is saying that one day a virgin will bring forth God. Come on, are you getting that? That's in the very, very first constellation, and that's what John sees in the heavens. Let me show you a picture of what it looks like. There's a free program called Stellarium. Stella, meaning star, S-T-E-L-L-A, Rium, R-I-U-M. Stellarium works on PC and Mac. You can enter in whatever country you want as your base. So you can put in Winnipeg, you can put in Greece, you can put in whatever you want. And then you can tell it, show me the sky in Greece in the 1st century. So this is what I did.
I'm just going to pause it just for a moment because I want to let you know about this app that I have on my phone, and it's called Skyview Light. It's super cool. You can, at nighttime and even in the day, you can point it to the stars, and it will tell you the names of the planets and the stars that you see and the constellations. It's super, super cool. And so I've been using that a lot. My kids have been using it, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a free app. I would go ahead and put it right on your phone if you don't have it yet.
I said, hey, could you show me what the sky looked like in Greece 2,000 years ago? So I see the sky. I said, show me when Virgo, the constellation, was in the night sky over Greece 2,000 years ago, and it gave me a date. I said, now show me a day where the sun was on its course and it passed through the center of Virgo. Show me that date, and so I got that date. And then I said, hey, NASA, is there a day where Virgo was in the sky, where the sun passed through the constellation and the moon was also passing underneath the constellation? And guess what? There was a day. Exactly like John said, exactly like John saw. Now, he even says there was 12 stars that make up her crown. And today, any basic astronomy map will show you that there are 12 stars that make up the crown. The complexity and the accuracy is stunning. Now, John said that when he looked up, he saw a dragon. Remember I saw a dragon in my dream? Well, John says this dragon whipped his tail and 1/3 of the stars fell from the sky. Does anybody know how many stars there are in the Milky Way galaxy? People usually say a lot. And that would be the correct answer. There are about 350 billion stars in our galaxy where we live. And every star is a sun. And each sun, they theorize, has a system of planets that go around it, just like we have 8 planets. So if every star has between 3 and 5 planets, and there are 350 billion stars, how many planets are there in our galaxy? A lot. Very good. That's one galaxy. So far, the Hubble Space Telescope has found over 100 billion galaxies. So how many stars are there in the universe? Lots. And the Bible says that God knows each star, and he calls them by name. Anybody here have 4 children or more? Can I see your hands? Wow, you had the strength to raise your hands. Amazing. You ever mess up your kids' names? Yeah, you call the girls boys and the boys girls and all that, right? And then you finally get it right, you feel good. You got 4 names right. There are, I don't know if cajillion is a number, cajillions of billions and trillions and hundreds of millions of stars in the sky. And God says, I know them all by name. He says, in fact, I made them all. I named them, and then I placed them to make patterns in the sky so they would be signs for you. So that at nighttime, when you look up at them, you'd be able to know when the Messiah came, who he was. That's extravagant love. That God would design the universe to tell the story of the coming Messiah so we would have no doubt as to who he was. Now, I think Joe Amaral, this guy here, is a pretty impressive guy. I do. I'm very impressed with myself. preach. I think I'm amazing. But you know what? The universe never aligned itself for me. I went on Stellarium. I was born in Portugal. I put Portugal, I'm not kidding you, as the home country. I said, show me the sky on March 30th, 1970. And I expected there to be shooting stars and planetary alignments. And guess what there was? Nothing. So sad. But what if I told you that for one person, one time in history, it aligned itself to declare his birth? Would you say that person was pretty important? Let me show you. So the Bible says then that the dragon flung his tail and 1/3 of the stars fell from the sky. How do we understand that? I'm going to ask Pastor if you would come and be my prop this morning. Face these lovely people. Okay, he is the sun. He is the center of our solar system. No applause, wow, okay. You see, up until a few hundred years ago, we thought the earth was at the center of our solar system and that everything revolved around us. Some of us still think everything revolves around us. Ouch. But he's the center of our solar system. I need an earth. Who would like to be my earth this morning? His wife. Come here. Oh, she's sneaky. She was in the front row in the first meeting, and now she's 1, 2. Wow, no, he's come out of the darkness into the light. So this is our earth. And so I would like for you, if you can, I would like for you to walk around the sun. Okay, so she's symbolizing to us what's happening right now. Oh, hey, you're getting ahead of yourself. Hang on. Just walk.
I just want you to parade around.
You're liking this a little too much. Okay. You see, the earth is moving around the sun at 55,000 miles per hour. That's pretty fast, right? Now, while you're walking, you're seeing different parts of the sanctuary, right? Okay, but the earth...
I just want to point out, I want to say thank you so much to John for his generous donation. That was so nice, John. And he is a great friend of the channel. He says, thumbs up for the stream. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So here we go.
Earth isn't just going around, it's also turning. It takes 24 hours to make one revolution, one turn. So I want you to turn while you walk. This is like, can you chew gum and walk at the same time? Watch your step. Don't want the earth to fall and get hurt. Easy now. Okay, so what's happening? We're joking here, but you can stop now.
Okay, thanks.
You see, as she was going around her orbit, she's looking at different parts of the sanctuary. That's us. When we're going around our orbit around the sun, we're turning and we're moving, we're speeding up and we're slowing down, and we're looking at different parts of the universe. That's why the night sky is never the same month after month, because as we're going around here, we're looking at this constellation, this constellation, this constellation. So when John says Virgo, oh, I know where we are on our orbit, because we only see Virgo for a very short period of time. You understand? So then John says that the dragon flung its tail. Well, what does that mean? That means wherever the earth was, he could see Virgo and the dragon. And guess what? They're right beside each other on constellational maps. And in the tail part of the dragon, we pass through the remnants of a comet that leaves trillions of rocks. And every year as we pass through this debris field, we have a meteor shower. So to John, it looked like stars were falling out of the sky as it was hitting the Earth's atmosphere and burning up. So when John said 1/3 of the stars fell from the heaven, he was actually seeing an asteroid or a meteor shower. Does everybody understand? Now, the meteor shower only takes place during one part of the year when we're going through that part of space. And it happened that year. It took place for 3 days, September 10th, 11th, and 12th. And the peak of the meteor shower was in the middle on the 11th of September in 3 BC. Now we're coming up to Christmas. So this is a great time to talk about what the Christmas star was. Have you heard different theories? Right now they're thinking it was a comet. Some say it was a massive meteor shower. Maybe it was a conjunction, like a lining up of planets, a supernova, a star that blew up. Or maybe it was a special star God created just for that night because he's God, he could do that. There's all kinds of different theories. But what if there is a plausible explanation? And what if, based on this planetary alignment, I could tell you the exact day of his birth? Because God said he created the stars, the sun and the moon, to serve as signs, to mark sacred times. You see, the Bible talks about these three wise men, or these wise men called magi or magi, which in the ancient language means astronomers. Let me ask you a question. Why would these non-Jewish astronomers make a trek across the desert over weeks and weeks and weeks, possibly in months? Why would they risk their lives, dying in the wilderness, getting jumped by robbers or thieves? Why would they make this journey from modern-day Iran all the way to Jerusalem and then into Bethlehem to see the birth of a little Jewish boy? Why would they do that? Unless they knew something that we didn't. Let me paint for you a picture.
I want to note something. It wasn't that they came to see the birth of the little Jewish boy. It was that they came to see the Jewish boys. They didn't say specify the word birth, because it's my understanding that there was a period of time between his birth and the time when they saw the Magi. And so I just want to point that out. But the Magi did follow the evidence in the sky.
You see, astronomy in those days was a generational occupation. So if I'm an astronomer and for 50 years I'm observing the night sky and I notice there's a pattern to things. I see things moving year after year in the same way, and I'm watching this one light move throughout space. And then my colleagues observe something else moving throughout space. And we do a calculation and we say, oh my goodness, in 500 years from now, these two objects are going to align. And so I pass on my work to the next person and to the next person, and the calculations get tighter and tighter. And then within my lifetime, I realize this alignment is going to take place. Whoever this person is who's about to be born, he is so important that the universe is lining itself up for him. Come on, that's a wow. And so these guys...
It is pretty important. One of the things that a lot of people like to say, especially skeptics, or they call themselves self-titled skeptics, they like to say that we don't have evidence. The people who lived in the past were ancient goat herders, and they say a lot of very disparaging things about the ancients. But the ancients actually were quite sophisticated about a number of different things. Don't forget that we had philosophers such as Socrates and Aristotle a few hundred years before Jesus. And of course, we had a lot of astronomers pointing to very sophisticated things in the sky that I don't even pay much attention to myself, probably because it's interesting in our times, we can't see the stars so much in the sky in certain parts of the country when we have a lot of lights on our planet. So because we have so much light on our planet in the nighttime, people have the artificial lights that we have, it actually kind of minimizes the number of stars we can see. And I know this because I was once out at sea, and I was pretty far out at sea in the Atlantic Ocean, and I looked up in the sky and I was completely astounded to see the number of stars that I could see at that point, because the sky was so clear to me, because it wasn't messed up with all the light that we have that's shining in here. And it's probably something, interestingly, if you look at a map and you look at a place like North Korea, you're going to see that there's only one light pretty much in North Korea at night. The rest of North Korea seems to have no electricity at night, and it's really sad, but actually, at least one bright side for them is they can see this beautiful sky and all its stars. So here we go.
Guys begin to make the journey, and when they get to Jerusalem, they said, where is this newborn King of the Jews? Why? Because we have seen his star. Not a star, but we have seen his star. Why was it such a big deal? Let me throw something at you, okay? They watched this star move across the sky, and right away scientists say the Bible's not true. Stars are fixed points in space-time. They don't move. So if the wise men were following a star, the Bible's full of lies, because stars don't move. How do you refute that? It wasn't a star. It was a planet. Planetos in Greek means a wandering star. So they're actually following a planet, and that planet was called Jupiter. Now, why is this important? Are you guys ready to have your minds blown a little bit? I know this side is, because you got 2 DVDs already. Anybody over here ready for your minds to get blown? You, sir. Okay, I'm going to blow your mind. Ready? Are you the announcement guy from this morning? Yeah? Okay. Jupiter is traveling through the night sky. The Greeks call all the planets kings in mythology. So if Jupiter is the largest of all the planets, and it's called a king, what's the term for Jupiter? Jupiter's called the king of kings. It's the king planet, and Jupiter is so large, I read an article that Jupiter has saved Earth from utter destruction at least 4 times that we know of. Jupiter is so large, it's just far enough from us. If it was too close to us, it would pull us in. If it was too far away from us, we would lose our orbit. It's right in the perfect distance from us, holding us, keeping us, locking us in this eternal dance around the sun. So it's perfectly positioned and has just enough gravity that when large comets or asteroids or massive space debris come through, you know what Jupiter does? It takes it and it pulls it in around the planet and then launches it back out into deep space and protects humanity from being destroyed. Did you know that? Jupiter is called the savior planet. It's called the guardian of the galaxy. And we know of at least 4 times where Jupiter is so powerful, it took a massive object, and because it didn't have enough, it was too big to swing around the planet, Jupiter pulled it into its own atmosphere and took the impact upon itself. Come on, the king of kings planet took upon itself the impact of that which would have destroyed humanity.
One thing you might want to note if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet is go to Hugh Ross, take a look at Reasons to Believe, and that's his website. And if you go on there, you're going to notice that he's identified, I think it's either 11 or 12 habitable zones right now that the Earth occupies. And some of the amazing things that he talks about is the percentage of ocean water that we have on the Earth. He talks about the distance from the Earth that the moon is, how the moon is exactly locked in with the Earth, the size of the moon, and how we would need a moon that size to have the kind of conditions that we have on this Earth to live. So he talks about it's rather miraculous when you consider that they've analyzed a number of other planets in our same galaxy, and no other planets have the same number of habitable zones. In fact, most of them have no habitable zones, and there is one of them that has 2 habitable zones, and that's the one that's the closest to us. But you would need at least 12 habitable zones. It's either 11 or 12 to survive as we do on this planet. So for life to be as it is on this planet and the conditions to be as they are, which are pretty much miraculous, you've got to give the Creator his due.
And that's the star they were following. And so Jupiter's moving across the sky. And then it aligns itself with another star called Regulus, which means the little king. And that took place in a constellation called Leo. And Leo is called the constellation of the king. And so the king planet aligned with the king star in the constellation of the king once. Come on. And at the same time that was happening, Virgo was in the sky. Remember the sun? The sun was passing through Virgo, and the moon for 80 minutes came under the feet of Virgo. All that stuff happened at one point in time. Whoever that was, he was so important that the universe aligned itself to declare his birth. Wow. Now, all that took place. Don't get too excited about the day of the year, because on our calendar, it might seem a little spooky. But all that took place on the 11th of September in the year 3 BC. It doesn't stand for before Christ. It stands for before the Common Era. So on September 11th, 3 BC, that's when all those alignments took place. And in fact, that's the night Jesus was born. Now it gets crazier. You guys ready? Then I'm going to get ready to hand it off. How's your brains? Yours is okay? Anybody over here? Woo. Is that the free DVD lady? You only get one per server. Save the woos. On the Hebrew calendar, that took place on Tishri 1. That's the first of Tishri. And why that day is important is because in the biblical calendar, that's called the Feast of Trumpets. Today we call it Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. But why is the Feast of Trumpets so important? Why is the first day important? Because on that day in ancient Israel, that's when the king was declared to the country. Come on. The day they were waiting for the king to be declared was the day Jesus, the King of Kings, was born.
Which is pretty amazing. Now, just consider this also, that what it says in the Bible. It says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord." And then in another passage, it says, "The New Year trumpet also proclaimed hope in the ongoing and ultimate kingship of God, in God's judgment and reward according to people's deeds, and in Israel's final restoration." So we've got some really significant dates and points and lining up with the Bible here, and then the constellations. I mean, I understand that some people are very skeptical of this kind of information, but it's truly amazing as far as I can see.
If that doesn't knock you off your socks, I don't know what else to tell you. Come on. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Could you imagine when I was studying this in my house? I nearly fell off my chair. And what I'm about to show you next blew my mind. You see, I've learned that us older folks say wow, but young people don't say wow. I heard it's not cool. So I was preaching at a young adults conference, and during the service, this kid did this to me. Right, you guys see that? And it was so distracting that I had to stop my message, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Dude, you're blowing my mind." Then another kid was doing this during the service. I was like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm picking up pieces of my brain from off the floor because you blew my mind." So I'm at my chair going like this, "God, you're freaking me out. You're blowing my mind." And I read this verse, and I'd never seen it before. Jesus himself, the Messiah, the Son of God, the creator of heaven and earth, he says there will be what? Signs. Zodiacs, constellations, they're made up of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Jesus himself told us to look. He said, "Look up and you will see the sign of the Son of Man in the clouds, in the skies." Jesus himself even tells us to look up. When I began to see this in the scripture, it blew my mind. Now, I think I have time to do this, right? We're at 12:30, we're good? Okay. Have you guys heard about the blood moons? Right? Ooh, the blood moons. Well, the blood moons came, they went, and we're still here. It's like we as Christians don't learn. We love to predict the future. We love to predict the coming of the King, even though he said, "No man." Not even the angels in heaven, not even me, he says, "I don't know the hour," but we know the hour apparently, because every few years we spit out a new number. And don't we come out looking great? It's like we don't.
It actually is kind of an encouragement when he says something like this, and how the end times could be written in the stars. It would be interesting for astronomers to take a look at how the stars line up in the next few hundred years, just for fun. Why not? See if there are any kind of interesting constellations and occurrences in the coming future. And I'm sure probably some already have. And so that would be an interesting thing for us to take a look at.
Don't learn. Well, I'm not predicting. I believe astronomy is reflective in nature. It causes us to look back, and it affirms what God said in the Bible he would do. So they're reflective. They're not predictive. I'm not doing this so you can go home and fast forward through space-time on your new app and see when Jesus is coming. No. I'm telling us to look back. It'll confirm, it'll affirm what God said he would do. Now, a blood moon is an apocalyptic, religious term, but it's just called a lunar eclipse, right? That's when you have the sun is here, the earth is here, and the moon just comes in at the right angle behind the earth that it gets no direct sunlight. It gets no light from the sun. And the earth puts off a red spectral color. And so for about an hour and a half, the moon appears to go red as it comes out from behind the earth from this alignment. And the Bible talks about it, and it says in Joel that on the great day of the Lord, that the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon will be turned to blood, meaning there will be a lunar eclipse on the great day of the Lord. What if I told you that based on when a blood moon appeared, I could tell you the day and the hour that Jesus was crucified? Would that be pretty cool? Now, that wouldn't be prophetic of me, because God said, I created the signs to mark sacred times. So we should not be surprised that on the day Jesus was born and the day he was crucified, that there were celestial events. So I wondered, well, Joel talks about a blood moon. I wonder if there was a blood moon during the time of Jesus. So I went to my friends at NASA. And I said, can you please show me the blood moons that took place in the first century, 100 years from the time of Jesus till after? And it said, oh, there was 2 lunar eclipses. There were 2 blood moons in the first century. I said, okay, can you narrow it down for me? Can you show me when there was a lunar eclipse during Passover? Because Jesus was crucified as the Passover lamb, right? On Passover. And also, can you show me when there was a blood moon in the first century that took place at Passover, that took place at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, because that's when Jesus died. And guess what? There was one day. There was one day in history where there was a blood moon at 3 o'clock on Passover in the first century. Come on. It was April 3rd, 33 AD. It's the only time in all of history where there was a blood moon at 3 o'clock in the first century on Passover. Why?
I just want to build on this for a moment, because if you haven't seen it yet, go in to look at Daniel 9. What's really interesting in Daniel 9 is he says, from the date that the decree to rebuild Jerusalem goes out, there will be 77s less 7. And so if you take that and look at it the way the Jews for Jesus looked at it, that comes out to 483 years. Now, they've done 4 different estimates of what possibly could be the date when the decree to rebuild Jerusalem went out. The last one is 444 BC, and scholars, after looking at the passage and looking at the particulars around these different options, have selected that one, Harold Hayner as an example, as the date that to start the countdown. And so if you actually do the countdown there and you use 360-day years and you skip the year 0 and you look at the months that are in other books such as Ezra and Nehemiah, you're going to find some really interesting stuff. That's going to lead us to the Passion Week of 33 AD. So we have an alignment with the Bible on specific dates, not only in the constellation, but in the prophecies. We also know that Jesus had to come prior to the destruction of the Second Temple, because Daniel had prophesied that he would be there and that the temple would be destroyed. We also know that the temple was destroyed in the year 70. So we know that because the temple was destroyed in the year 70, and we know from Malachi 3:1 that the Anointed One was to appear in the temple, we've got pretty good evidence that the Savior had to come in that time period. Now, of course, as you saw, the Magi had also indicated, I mean, ask yourselves why these Magi were traveling around thinking something really significant had happened, because something really significant had happened in the sky. Okay, so they knew that there was something very important, and they did their calculations and came to Jerusalem to speak to King Herod. Why do you think King Herod decided that he was going to have all the people under 2 years old killed? Think about that. Well, he did that because he did not want competition. He was a king and he did not want to have another king. So it was interesting that Joseph, who's Jesus's father, earthly father, decided that he had had a dream where an angel told him he better escape to Egypt to escape that persecution. And he did that. And so they escaped to Egypt. And that's also in fulfillment of the scriptures that said, out of Egypt I called my son. Okay, so we've got a lot of evidence. Now, if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, no, the Jews had expected a different kind of Messiah, then you're going to refute your own self, because if you go and look at Sanhedrin 97 and 98, you're going to see that the Jews realized that there were two types of Messiah. There was the one that was predicted in Zechariah 9:9, who would come lowly and humble, riding upon a donkey. And there was the one that was going to come in the clouds of heaven, in the glory of God, sitting at the right hand of the mighty one. And that's, of course, from Daniel 7. So we had two types of Messiah. And the Jews realized that if they were not good, if Israel was not obedient, that they would have the first type of Messiah would arrive. So we're going to see both types of Messiah. As Christians believe, he will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. Okay, so we believe in two types of Messiah. If you want to know exactly what I believe in, you can go listen to the Apostles' Creed. You can see we believe in one God, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, of all things seen and unseen. We believe in his only Son, his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and we believe in the Holy Spirit. And one of the reasons why I'm pointing this kind of stuff out is because I see Stuart Scott in the chat, and and I see others in the chat who are definite skeptical of some of the things that we're saying. But we've got a lot of evidence all over the place to support Jesus as Lord. I'm pointing out Stuart Scott because he said, I'm not into this New Age woo. No, I'm not into New Age woo. New Agers, it's really interesting because the New Agers are trying to say that Jesus is just a man who had figured out some New Agey kinds of ideas, like connecting himself in with the universe and becoming the Christ. They believe that they can become the Christ, okay? And it's interesting because Jesus refuted them himself. He said people would come claiming to be the Christ, and that's what the New Agers are doing. So I am going to take a combat against that group of people in the next few months. That's something I'm going to work on. I'm actually decided to write a book about that because I believe that that particular belief system is of Satan. And so that's where I stand on that particular belief system. And that relates to progressive Christianity to the extent that people deny the resurrection. So if you deny the significance of the resurrection, you find yourself in this group. You need to really check what your beliefs are. And I would really advise going to the Bible. I am covering this group also because I was part of it. I actually held some of those beliefs that I'm listening to now and finally understanding exactly what I was thinking back in my 30s when I was and 20s when I was looking into other faiths. I was reading people like Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra and James Redfield and a whole bunch of other ones, the Dalai Lama. I was thinking that they had the truth. And I realized looking back on it in hindsight, holy cow, was I duped. And so I don't want you to be duped. If you're in that position, get out. Read the Bible, read the Gospels. It will do you a world of good.
Why? Because God said, I've created these to serve as signs. One more? See, I love coming in and just downloading this information into your hearts. Because whether you're a believer or you're not a believer, you cannot dismiss the overwhelming evidence that God has put such effort into creating the universe and making these massive alignments. We had the conjunction of the planet, the star, the constellation, the sun. We had all that going on. And then we had the blood moon on Friday on Passover, 3 o'clock.
I want to point out a couple of other things. I'm just going to stop this video for now. I'm going to come back to the mainstream here, but I want to point out a couple of things to you in case you also haven't given this much thought. Consider that we have, within 150 years of Jesus' resurrection, we have 33 Christian sources that have confirmed various activities and things like that in the Bible. Some of these are biblical passages, of course, but some are extra biblical, and those are Christian. And then we have 9 secular sources that have also offered confirmation for the events surrounding Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. We have people who are extra biblical, who are non-Christians, who have pointed to the fact that the apostles did believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and many of them went to their deaths with brutal, gory persecutions that were occurring. They didn't have it easy. And if you haven't given this much thought, think about this. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. He did not want to meet the same fate as Jesus. He went and hid. It's embarrassing he wasn't even present during Jesus's crucifixion. In fact, the only one who was present was the beloved disciple John. okay, who was a male. The females were present. Mother Mary was present. Mary Magdalene was present, but others were not present during Jesus's crucifixion because they thought they'd be crucified too. They were super worried about it. Then you think about Paul. Paul was standing at the feet of St. Stephen when Stephen was being stoned. St. Stephen was the very first Christian martyr, and he had been stoned to death. And as he was being stoned, he looked into the sky and he saw the sky open and he saw the mighty one. And he said, forgive them. Who does that? But someone who's filled with godly actions does that. So Paul was there at the feet of St. Stephen, approving of that activity. Then Paul went out to get the necessary documentation so that he could also go around, round up people of the way and put them into prison or even have them executed. Okay, so Paul was on the road to Damascus, cursing at Jesus, cursing at the movement, I should say, cursing at Christians and all that kind of stuff, thinking that he was doing the right thing for the Jewish cause. He was a very ardent Jew, and he was very well read. He knew the Old Testament like the back of his hand, but he didn't really understand passages such as Isaiah 53 and Zechariah 12:10 and Psalm 22 that had pointed to the one who was pierced for our transgressions. In fact, in Psalm 22, it even says his hands and his feet were pierced. Okay. Some people have tried to deny it actually says pierced, but fortunately, as Dr. Michael Brown has pointed out, we can simply go to the Dead Sea Scrolls to see exactly what the word was. And Michael Brown, who's very familiar with the Hebrew text and ancient Hebrew, has said that the word is pierced. So we know that was supposed to happen, but Paul didn't realize that. So he's on the way to Damascus thinking he's doing all of the right thing. And what happens? He hears, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? He says, who are you, Lord? Realizing it was the Lord. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. So Saul was blinded for a short period of time. He fasted. And then Ananias went in there and at Jesus's instructions, and Paul, it felt like scales fell off out of his eyes, and he became one of the most prolific apostles, going around for decades preaching despite being chased, despite the Jews in Jerusalem actually creating a pact that they were not going to eat until they killed him. Okay, they decided they were going to fast until they killed Paul. So he had to escape from Jerusalem. He was constantly on the run. He was encountering being stoned. He was prisoned. All sorts of things happened to him. Finally, unfortunately, Nero in Rome beheaded Paul. Okay, so we've got evidence of that that's also outside of the Bible. We also have evidence that Peter was crucified in Rome also. In fact, one of the really interesting things that Jesus said is he told the apostles, Peter, James, and John, that some of the people among them, and he had other apostles there at the time, that as they were standing there, he said that they would see a taste of heaven. And so then right after that, he took those three apostles up to a mountain and transfigured before him. And what's interesting is Moses and Elijah appeared with him, and the apostles were stunned, blown away, shocked. They didn't really know what to say. This was a really interesting event for them. So what did the apostles do? They offered to, they just kind of tried to make time trying to figure out exactly what was happening. What's interesting is in those passages that they refer to the transfiguration, we wonder, how did the apostles know that Moses was Moses and Elijah was Elijah? Because they weren't named there. So it kind of speaks to maybe our heavenly bodies will be in such a way that they'll be able to, people will know who you are, even if you don't communicate it yourself. So that's kind of an interesting little sidebar. Another interesting sidebar to add on top of what the person in the last video was just saying is that if you read the book of Matthew, you're going to see the part where the soldier who witnessed everything that happened surrounding Jesus's crucifixion. So of course, that's things like the blood moon, the tearing of the veil in the temple, which was very significant because the veil was a huge, thick cloth that blocked a certain part of the temple, the holiest of holies, from the rest of the temple. So only the most holy people could even go in there. But that whole tore in half. And of course, we had the blood moon appear. You wonder why the soldier just sort of out of the blue said, surely he was the Son of God. This is a Roman soldier, pagan, who says, surely he was the Son of God. And so we have that sort of thing happening. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Now, I already mentioned Peter and Paul. What I didn't mention is James, Jesus's half-brother. So Jesus had a half-brother, James. He had some other brothers too, like Jude. He had 4 brothers, actually, and he had some sisters. And Jesus's half-brother spent, of all of the apostles, of course, he spent the most time with Jesus. He spent his whole life with Jesus. Jesus is the oldest brother. And he and his other brothers tried to stop Jesus's ministry. Okay, they thought he had gone a little bit nuts. Okay, so they tried to stop him, and they were definitely not believing in Jesus, and they were doubting him because Jesus hadn't showed them any signs. You do recall the very first sign that Jesus showed his apostles, or I should say his mother actually, was at the wedding at Cana. Okay, so the very first sign was changing water into wine. But anyway, going back to James. So James tried to stop Jesus's ministry. So then we get to 1 Corinthians 15, which is a very early creed. And what does it say? It says that Jesus appeared first to Peter, okay? Then he appeared to others. He appeared to the 12. He appeared to 500. He appeared to the brother James, that's specified there. And that actually also distinguishes James the apostle from James the half-brother. So he appeared to James, and then he appeared to the one abnormally born, which was Paul, okay? So what did James do? Now, here's a person who spent his entire life, not realizing he was in the midst of the Son of Man. I mean, imagine how incredibly difficult such a conception would be for somebody. So he spent his life with Jesus. He tried to stop Jesus' ministry. Guess what he did? He wrote the book of James in the Bible. His brother Jude, also Jesus' half-brother, wrote the book of Jude in the Bible. And in that book, James makes it pretty clear that Jesus is Lord. Okay, so he came to the belief. Now, question yourself, what made him believe that? We also know from Josephus that James also was martyred. Okay, James was leading up the church in Jerusalem, and he was martyred as well. So all three of these people preached for Jesus for decades, and you have to be honest about this. Why would they do that? They were in the unique position to know whether or not what they believed was the truth. And so I just want to say that that's just something to pick up. Okay, so if you guys are having doubts, doubt no more. I mean, we have plenty of evidence giving support for Jesus' resurrection. And you're all, if the reason why you're not a Christian or the reason why you've adopted these other beliefs is because maybe you think, as I did, I used to think that Christianity was just the default for me. And I didn't think it was as interesting as some of these new agey woo ideas. Or you could be the kind of person who just says, I'm just going to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. And even though the earth looks as beautiful as it does, and even though the skies and the cosmos scream God, I'm going to go ahead and deny his existence. So if you're sitting in that position, I don't think you've honestly considered the evidence surrounding the resurrection. Okay, so that was an interesting video that we had. I'm looking at the chat right now. I want to see if anyone has any questions or thoughts or anything that you'd like to say. I can put them into the screen here and do that sort of thing. So I'm just going to ask you that. So if you've got any questions, thoughts, interesting ideas, I could even open this up. I don't know if you have thoughts on the video that we just saw. I just saw it for the first time this morning. I want to say Merry Christmas to all of you as we're in the Christmas season, and this has just been a really rotten year, so I'm sure we're really glad to get out of 2020, so can't really have gotten much worse than this. So let's see, I've got what do we have here? So I want to say hi to everybody who's in the chat. Earlier I saw Slam RN and Deconverted Man, John V, Stuart Scott, Taking Back Eden, that's John, and so I want to say thank you to you guys for coming in here. And I think what we could do is I'm going to speak to just a little bit more on some of the evidence that we have for the crucifixion. So I want to point out something that is something else. So let me just get to where that is. Okay, so that's... Oh, I know what I wanted to point out. So I wanted to also point out the Paschal Lamb. So this is a really interesting thing that is mentioned. So we know that the Passion Week was right around April, the first week of April, last week of March, in the year 33. And what's interesting is the way that this mimicked exactly what was done in the Exodus, prior to the Exodus, and in the early books, when the Jews were told that they were supposed to, it says here, and ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. So the Jews were supposed to go out on Monday of the Passion Week and select the Paschal lamb. They were going to select the lamb that they were going to sacrifice at the Passover, and they would pick that out on Monday. Well, interestingly, and in fulfillment of Zechariah 9:9, Jesus presented himself on Monday of the Passion Week as the Paschal lamb. So what he did was he he came into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and he was recognized as the Savior at that point in fulfillment, again, of Zechariah 9:9. And so the week goes on, and we see other events that occurred. And of course, then we know the Last Supper, which occurred on Thursday of the Passion Week. Then we have Friday of the Passion Week, which, as you saw, we've got evidence even in the sky for that. So we have Friday, and we actually also have evidence for an earthquake that occurred in the year 33. And I've documented that in prior videos and lots of academic studies to support that. But we also, again, have the earthquake that occurred in that same year. They haven't been able to pinpoint the exact date, but they have looked at the Dead Sea Basin, and they've looked at different evidence that they have to figure out when earthquakes occur. And they call those seismites, and they saw that there is evidence for the year 33. So we've got a lot of good stuff with that. So Jesus then was crucified on the day that the lambs were sacrificed. That's exactly how they did it. He happened to be crucified on the exact same day, again, as our Passover lamb, the one who saves us, the one who was supposed to be without sin. Of course, Jesus was without blemish, as the Passover lamb was supposed to be. He took one for the team. He died for us and for our sins and for our salvation. If you wonder why that had to happen, it's because we were bound here in our sin. Through sin, we cannot reconcile with God. So with God's perfect mercy and perfect justice and perfect love, Jesus reconciled God's those traits about God. So, okay, so I see Blaster Master says here something. Let me just put this up on the thing and read it. S.J. Thomason, the majority of astronomers do not believe in a God. When you say others haven't researched the cosmos enough, that's why they don't believe. Is it possible you are gaslighting? I don't think so, Master Blaster. I don't think I'm gaslighting. I'm actually going to go out and take a look at, and I can't say I have never. I actually took an astronomy class in college, but this is so many years ago, I can barely remember it. But I'll have to go out and I'm going to take a look at those applications like the stellarium, and I'm going to take a look at dates into the future and see if there are any interesting celestial signs in the sky, because I think that's fascinating stuff. So I also want to say hi to, I see, who else did I see? Stripper Liquor is in here. That's another friend of the channel. So it says, hope you're having a good day, Susan. That's always nice. Spartan Theology is somebody somewhere in here. If you guys have a question, just tag me and I will get to that. Let me just get this other screen going. So big plans for Christmas. Anyone have good plans coming up? I'm going to be chatting on Monday, just to let you know, with a person who is a Mormon who converted to Christianity. He converted to the Baptist faith, actually. And he did it based on evidence. Okay, so I just had a Mormon on my channel. You guys might remember that I had Scott Adams on my channel. Really nice guy. He discussed his reasons and he answered some of my tough questions and some of Susan's tough questions. But this person who's coming on Monday, Eric told me that he thinks that there are some things that Scott didn't say. And of course, I don't know enough about the Muslim faith to know what he didn't say. So Eric is going to unveil what Scott didn't say about the Muslim faith that actually is what led him away from the Muslim faith and towards the Baptist church. And so that's going to be at 2:00 Eastern on Monday. So you want to go ahead and definitely see it. So either the professor, Blaster Master, if you want to provide some evidence that the professionals in the field disagree, the person who was in that video said he went to NASA and he looked at stellarium. But if you've got evidence to show that we didn't have these celestial events in the year 3 BC on September 11th in Virgo, feel free to do so. But I think that what we see is we do have that evidence. The question is that Jesus's birthday? Okay, that's the big question. And so Richard Madsen says, peace and respect. Thank you. Impressive. I finally got your name. Why you've got your name spelled that way. Thank you, Susan. Says peace in Christ, y'all. So if anyone wants to come in here, I'm going to be going for probably another maybe 20 minutes. If you guys are interested, I can actually post a link if anyone wants to show up and just kind of come on in and voice your opinion on that video that I just gave. If you saw it, if you were here then. All right. So I'm pasting the link. Okay, so again, the evidence. So the other things that point to some pretty significant evidence that we've got fulfilled prophecies, we've got the actions of the early apostles, we've got the testimonies of a number of other extra-biblical authors, and we've got a lot of other evidence. So I think we've got a very good case for Christ. And then we also have people's experiences today. We've got people like Nabil Qureshi. Nabil was a Muslim. He was raised a Muslim. He had apologists in his background. And apparently in that particular faith, it's extremely difficult to leave. Okay, it's extremely difficult to leave the Muslim faith. And he chose to leave the Muslim faith. And but he did choose that because he asked God for a sign. And God gave him a sign. God gave him a sign where he was standing outside of a banquet, and he saw his friend who was a Christian named David Wood inside the banquet, and he was trying to get in there, but he couldn't. And David Wood said something like, Nabil said something to the effect that he wanted to get into the banquet, and David said, "You haven't accepted the invitation." And so when Nabil got off, he woke up that morning, he called David Wood and he told him about his dream. And David's like, "Oh my gosh, that's of course the banquet in the Bible." And he had to go to the passage and he saw the exact same situation where Jesus said he puts out the invitation and he's waiting for us to accept the invitation. And so that's something. Now I want to offer just a little bit of really quick before I bring in demolished doctrine. Got demolished doctrine. I want to point out something that you guys might want to think about. If you're following the Muslim faith, or I don't think I have too many Muslims who watch my channel. I don't watch Muslim channels, so it doesn't really surprise me. But if you follow the Muslim faith or you follow the Mormon faith, so I do have some Mormons watching the channel, take a look at Galatians 1:8 and thoughtfully consider what this says. It says, "But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we preached unto you, let him be accursed." Now, I did ask Scott Adams about that verse. I'm definitely going to be asking Eric Wendt also about that verse. Eric, again, is the one who converted to be the Baptist faith, or to get in the Baptist faith. But it's pretty interesting that God actually proactively and preemptively said that if an angel comes out and gives to you false doctrine, realize what that is. Let that person be accursed. Really important to thoughtfully consider that. Not only that God was being proactive, and Jesus also, as I pointed out earlier, was being proactive when he said people will be calling themselves Christs, which we see right now with Richard Rohr and the New Age movement. Okay, they're calling themselves the Christ. They think they can achieve enlightenment and be united with the Christ. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But anyway, God was very proactive in a whole bunch of verses in the Bible, specifying not only is God not packed into nature as the pantheists believe. They believe God is nature and is identical with nature. That's what pantheists believe. God has disqualified that in places like Isaiah 31:3, where he says that he separates himself. He's transcendent to nature. He's not inside of nature. He's not identical to nature. Okay, so that wipes away that belief. But Galatians 1:8 also wipes away the beliefs, because the Muslims believe that a jinn initially appeared to Muhammad, and then his sisters convinced him that was the angel Gabriel. I don't know why people would keep believing that. And then the Mormon faith, Joseph Smith, he believes that an angel Moroni appeared to him. Okay, so false doctrine. All right, so I'm going to bring in demolished doctrine. I haven't had demolished doctrine on my screen. I usually prefer you guys to show your faces, but I guess we'll just go with this. Oh, Richard Madsen, I think I've seen you somewhere. Where have I seen you before, Richard?
Peace and respect, SJ. Dr. Thomason, how are you?
I'm doing well. I've seen you. Where have I seen you? I've seen you on Twitter, is it? I definitely have seen your name. I know I've seen you in the here.
I know that you're a horribly busy person, and I can appreciate that because of your family, your career, etc. We have been trying to, or at least I have been trying to make effort to arrange with you a live show. So I don't have my face on right now, so you'll forgive me. Yeah, you've seen me probably the Raging Atheist, also Digital Hammurabi, also Skylar Fiction, also it's just several places you and I have frequented together.
Okay. Yeah, I was just on the Rage yesterday. So
yes.
I posted a quick review. I wasn't really that quick, 41-minute review of my portions of that video.
Well, if it's going to be thorough, it can't be quick now, can it?
Yeah, it wasn't. Well, I couldn't be as thorough as I like to be, but I was filming it at night, and I don't like to do anything at night because my husband gets annoyed. So I thought, because that's supposed to be family time. But so did you catch the video I showed on here, or did you catch the one yesterday on the Rage by chance, or?
I've caught some of these things before. I'm not certain that I would say I fully understand exactly what that person's trying to say. I won't assume that, but I do find it a very, very interesting topic. That there are things, even page 2 of the Bible, we use the stars as signs, symbols, and days. And all of that, saying that we will see with our naked, unaided human eye certain things that will tell us of signs of days and seasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things when we talk about the end times and we realize that Jesus has made it clear that he's going to come and every eye will see him. You think to yourself, now, how is that even possible? But in our modern times, because of the internet and because of cell phones and all that kind of stuff, actually, it could be possible, the whole world. So.
Well, basically, at least all of the developed world, I could safely say that with the internet system we have today, we could say all of the developed world will be able to see something like that.
You'd be surprised, actually. I've got one of the things that we do at our university is our entrepreneurship group does a lot of work, and a lot of the things that they do is they investigate different opportunities, especially for places that are impoverished. And they focused on Africa at one point. And it was really surprising to find out that a lot of the people who are in Africa will spend a lot of money on a cell phone and cell phone service, but they might not have barely anything else. And so one of the ways we were going to, at our university, some of the student groups were going to do, or one of the things that they were going to do was to figure out ways to get educational software that could appear on their cell phones so they could get educated on different topics. And I know people can go to places also in other sort of apps that you can get right online. So my kids go in and they look at some of those different things that are on, the Khan Academy and those kind of things. So that's just something that is interesting. So tell us about yourself, Richard. What are your beliefs?
Well, I believe that Christ is the truth, the way, and the light, that he directly aligns to our Father God, that the Bible is inerrant, although I think often misunderstood in way too shallow of a reading without real consideration of how it could comport to itself in reality, in a philosophical idea of why it would be accurate and important. I think too many people talk about it without true consideration.
Good. I thought you said demolished doctrine. I thought for sure you were a non-believer. So I'm happy to find out that we're on the same team. So.
On the same team generally, but still, demolished doctrine is something that I believe the Bible is describing, saying things like there will be no temple, there'll be no holy of holies in heaven, there'll be no need for it. Mm-hmm. That we will just simply have the truth and all religiosity will disappear at that time.
Okay. I think that's reasonable. It's just like we won't have the sun. We don't have the sun to light us in heaven. We'll have Jesus. And
right.
So that's interesting. So what's your favorite book of the Bible? If you had to pick a favorite?
Oh, Revelation.
I was wondering if you were going to say that, because that's today. That's a lot of what this video focused on is Revelation 12. Mm-hmm. So if you had to, do you think we're in the end time? I mean, I think we're generally speaking, we're in 2,000 years, still this big end times, like we are in the end times. But do you think the end times, and you could always say, I guess the end times, we could always make the claim that it's coming or it's near, because we know that no matter what, the earth is going to end, as an explosion or something, and the sun is going to fade out or whatever. But we know that the end is near eventually. But do you think it's close to us?
I think that the atheistic complaint that God does not make himself obvious, and the complaint that there's no forced inoculation to the innocent child who doesn't know any better but needs inoculated, is a false claim in consideration of the book of Revelation, where it's obviously talking about us living on this earth, seeing things that are of literally biblical proportion, that could not be repeated twice, so that people see the signs of the end times. Now, if you mean the minor signs, like perhaps what's happened in the Gaza Strip, and I think it was 1947, or things like that, then I'll say, yeah, there's been minor signs. But have we seen the major signs, the 8 signs in a row of huge magnitude that cannot be repeated, that couldn't happen in nature all by itself without intervention of angels? Then I think we've seen none of those signs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And yeah, that is pretty amazing actually when you talk about Israel. So you've got, actually it was 1948 May, I think. So it's 1878 years after Israel was destroyed, essentially in the year 70 AD. You've got it coming back and people speaking Hebrew. So I guess in the 1800s, a gentleman decided that he was going to try to learn the ancient Hebrew and teach it to his family, and that spread throughout now Israel. So and he taught it to his friends, and they all started speaking Hebrew. And so now that's the language, the official language over there in Israel. So I think those two issues of themselves are pretty miraculous. I mean, where are the Hittites? Where are the Perizzites? Where are all these ancient groups? They're gone. They're wiped out. And Canaanites, we don't see any of that. But what we do see is Israel. But then we know that the abomination of desolation is supposed to appear in the temple. Do you think there's going to be a third temple, or would you say that already has played out with maybe Nero or with Antiochus or somebody like that?
I suppose the key word there is in the temple itself, and how a person exegetes the word temple, I think is the thing that needs reviewed there. And that would be the deciding factor as to whether or not we're reading that part of the text correctly in order to say that it has or has not happened. So I think that's the crux of the arguments, the word temple right there, and just what do they mean by the temple? Mm-hmm. How do you exegete that word there?
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got a point. It's difficult for me because I look at the second temple and the fact that the veil was rent, the veil was torn, and that's God's signal to us that he, as the holiest of holy, came out of there, and now is, we're earthly temples. And so I just, it's a tough one. I actually am not totally sure, I have to admit. So more studying is needed on my part.
I would say how I read the temple, the rebuilding of the temple, Christ as the temple, us as the temple, the rendering of the curtain. I think that curtain referred to there is the same thing as what's spoken of as a veil over our eyes. That it represents our blindness. And to have the temple's curtain rent in half is for us to see the truth. And I think that's why it's important as a foreshadowing more than a history lesson, that we would see the obvious truth. And I think what it's referring to in the rendering of the temple curtain is the signs of end times happening, and that we would see the truth.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. What's interesting, I don't know if
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I was just thinking of also, there's recordings by people like Josephus talking about the temple and what was occurring between the year 30, which was when Jesus started his ministry, and the year 70. Josephus said that the temple doors, which were these massive, heavy structures that required numerous people to open and shut, started opening and shutting on their own.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. And so and then all of a sudden, of course, and then there was the sign, apparently when the temple was about to be destroyed, one of the things that the Israelites did, and also did with the first temple, is they stood up on top of the temple, and they'd throw the key. The first time they did this too, they threw the key to the temple up into the heavens. And I don't know what happened to it, but it was like one of the things was they thought the key was caught because it never came back down. And the same thing happened in the second temple, and that was something also recorded by Josephus. And so there's some cool stuff that if you look into the history that you can dig up from some of the ancient non-Christian writers even. So.
Well, I think the first thing that I try to do when I'm considering something is try to find a physical explanation for whatever the anomaly might be. I'd want to go into those temples and search for a key stuck on top of some rock, and see if it just happened to have landed on a ledge and never fell back down, or that the temple doors opening and closing by themselves. I'd want to know if that happened simultaneously or one at a time, and I'd like to look at tectonic plate shifts and volcanic activity in the area at the time. I'd want to look at things like that to see if the land mass was literally changing physical angle at the surface level. I'd like to look into things like that, because I think the first thing that I have to do in responsibility of anything that I believe is do my best to disprove it.
Yeah, and you could easily find volcanic activity, and you could also find earthquakes. I mean, I told you I found that in the year 33, There was an earthquake. There was also an earthquake in that same area in the year 30 BC, according to those academic writers. And I don't remember the ones that followed, but now that you're saying that, it makes me think I need to probably take a look and see, was there other kinds of activities going on in the earth? So good point.
I keep a running tab of things I'd like to learn, and it's around 35 things right now. How do you ever find the time to learn everything? I don't know.
No, you
We
can't.
just have a very short life.
I keep trying to write books where I'm compiling all the stuff I learn. And I just realized I don't, on the one I'm working on right now, I didn't really have a value proposition that distinguishes me from other writers and other apologists in the last few books I've written. So I thought I got to do something a little different. And I thought, okay, look what Mark Twain did. Mark Twain said, write what you know. And I thought, well, I was trying to write stuff that was refuting atheists. And now I realize I don't really know atheism. I've never been one. I don't understand it at all. But I do understand progressive Christians and New Agers. And so that's my new target. And so my new book is going to talk about that and also talk about the other steps that Satan has taken in recent times to try to destroy our society. So
I'm in a very, very odd position. Until age 42, I was an anti-theist. That is a very staunch, hardline atheist, making a positive claim there can be no God. But then saw something that was falsifiable in reality I could not deny, and came to understand there must be God.
Wow, what'd you see?
Oh, that's a long story, but I would be happy to tell the story. But you're trying to close up your show, and I'm trying to respect that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a long story. Well, maybe you did say that we had talked before and we were talking about doing a channel. I don't know if you have a channel, you want me to go on there, if you want to come back on here. But I'd
like to trade with you every other time and just bounce ideas off of each other and talk about logic and repercussions and consistency, coherency to reality, things like that, and what we can show that is true in the Bible. I'd like to have those conversations.
I would love to do that. And I definitely would love to do that. So that sounds good. You can definitely come on my channel anytime and I'll gladly go on your channel. I've got a lot of free time now. The reason I've been making more videos is because I just started a sabbatical, which is running all the way through the spring. And so I need to be studying my academic work actually too. So that's one of the reasons why I decided, okay, at 1 o'clock hardline, I'm going to go start working on this one paper I'm writing on millennials. And so here's what I found. I just to tell you, it's really interesting. Millennials, if you take you take the two younger generations, Generation Y and Z, and you compare them to the three older generations, the X, the Boomers, and the Silent Generation, there are significant differences in justifications for that younger generation for doing things like stealing and avoiding paying taxes and cheating and all kinds of other stuff. And I think, oh my gosh, what's happened to our society? But so that's
Right. Terrible. Would you have a question? I mean, what would be the most serious question you'd like to ask an atheist? I think I can steel man the position.
Oh, okay. Well, as an atheist, since you were an anti-theist, were you ever a Christian prior to being an anti-theist, or were you just always were you raised in an anti-theist?
I was raised up in a Catholic church, but had objections at a very early age and was the only child living at my mother's house that was not required to go to church.
Okay, that's interesting. So, because I was raised in a Catholic church too, so I can understand. That's another thing I can speak to. But the hardest thing for me to understand with the atheist is when you hear the evidence around Jesus's resurrection with the apostles. How do you deal with that? Because I honestly feel that's why I called Matt Dillahunty and made a fool out of myself a few years ago, because I didn't know how to talk to atheists back then without acting like a smug jerk. But I feel like to me that's so compelling. I can't get past it. Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, first, I'm sure you're aware we all have biases, and that would include me, and that would include you. So we have a way of looking at things that allows us to believe somewhat what we want to, what we like to believe, or what we have personal evidence and what we find compelling. And I think that's always true. Mm-hmm. So I think to say the evidence is so compelling, why doesn't an atheist change their mind is kind of the wrong question to ask. Mm-hmm. But instead, maybe we should be looking at it like, if I'd always been an atheist and all I know of this is the attitude that has been presented to me, which is why I'm an atheist, would that be compelling? And of course, the answer is no.
Yeah. So well, let me ask you, when you said you had was it a spiritual experience you had, or was it just evidence that you looked out in nature or something like that?
Oh gosh. I actually had what I've now learned is called a personal revelation.
Mm.
And that our Father explained to me one certain story of the Bible, which justifies a lot of contextual inconsistencies within the text, or explains away a lot of the need for apologetic. And although in itself it seems overly complicated, it actually justifies the signs of end times in reality.
Wow. Would you share which verse that was? Or do you remember?
It's 1 Samuel 16:23 through 18:6. The story of David and Goliath.
Oh, David and Goliath. Okay. Interesting.
He's shown me a reading of David and Goliath that is falsifiable, justifiable, comports with reality, plausible in physics, showing a series that people would see with the naked eye, unaided human eye with normal vision, while standing on this earth, that would be the signs of end times. And yes, they would have to happen in that order as the book of Revelation gives them, and they would be of the magnitude given and unrepeatable.
Interesting. Yeah, because I've listened to a couple of videos on David and Goliath, and people think that Goliath might have had the same disease that Andre the giant had, which is really affecting his vision, which is why he kept calling David to get closer to him. So
well, people can say a lot of things, and that's part of the problem. A lot of what I find to be true of Christian in a doctrinal sense, not in an individual sense, is that they're working very, very hard to justify things because they don't quite make sense, like you just gave example of. Well, I would have to ask the question: if he has bad eyesight, why is he the best warrior?
Yeah.
Well, that's a bad argument. To say, oh, he probably was nearsighted. Well, then he'd be retired, wouldn't he?
I'll have to. Yeah, that's a good counter argument for sure. I'll have to go back and look at those passages. In those passages, does that also make mention of the Samuel, how he came back? He was called back from the dead.
No, that's not part of the same exact story.
Okay, I know that's not part of the same story, but I know that that's somewhere in there. I don't know the book that well, but
it is in the prophet Samuel. Yes, that's included in the entirety of the book, but not specifically in the story of David and Goliath. Is that recollection in there?
No, that's fantastic. I think that's great when you get a revelation. And so I heard in 2016, the one I've received spiritual signs too, and a few of them, vision and dreams and things like that. But my biggest thing that happened to me was in 2016, I heard the audible voice of God, who corrected me for something that I was thinking that was pretty embarrassing looking back on it. He's like,
the good father chastises the child.
Yes, exactly.
So be happy when you're chastised.
I am. Actually, what really happened after that is I found several verses in the Bible that said I should be happy when I'm corrected. And I thought, oh, I should. Okay. Well, thank you then. And I was happy. I mean, it actually was really good. It worked out for me.
And I think that's probably part of the biggest problem that we have in human nature, not necessarily Christian and atheist, but both, or believer and atheist, whatever they believe, is that we don't like to be proven wrong. We don't enjoy that. Because of our pride versus our value in truth, we'd rather be wrong and feel comfortable than be uncomfortable and be corrected. But I have to say that I have only learned from no my whole life. I've never learned from yes. Yes is only confirmation. When did you ever learn from yes?
Yeah, that's true. And I never heard the verbal yes or an add a girl or anything like that. Instead, it's like, wait a second, bad idea. Let me correct you. So that's the other thing. What's that?
I was going to ask you a question. I'm sorry. I thought you.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Paused and I interrupted. I'm sorry.
I'll go another 10 minutes and then I have to go. Then I'll do my research. So.
Do
What were you
you
gonna say?
think it would be entertaining to you or edifying to you if we were to review how I'm reading the story of David and Goliath sometime?
Yeah.
And I actually wrote a paper on this that I could link you so you could have some idea of what I'm speaking of before we had that conversation. If that's you being the academic that you are, I'm sure you would appreciate just a written paper.
I would absolutely appreciate the paper, and I'd also like to talk about it because I don't really investigate the Old Testament nearly as much as I look into the New Testament, just because I don't really like it as much. It's like,
You
but
don't like it as much? What does that
I
mean?
like the prophecies. I love the prophecies, but I don't. Some of the stories in the Old Testament are hard to kind of grasp for me, and so I've just spent more because I feel like when I want to know how God is or who God is, I look to Jesus, and so I really go into the New Testament because of that. So I like the parables but I'd like to dig deeper into that story with David and Goliath. Absolutely. We could do that on your channel if you want.
I'd love to do it. Well, it's not going to be 5 minutes. I'll tell you that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's one of the things that you just reminded me of, I think is important. I looked at one of the books that I read when I was kind of making my way back to Christianity is Lee Strobel's book, A Case for Easter. That was one of the first apologetic books I read. And I have to say, one of the things that kind of did turn me off a little bit about that book was he spent a lot of time trying to give naturalistic explanations for some of the events in the New Testament, for example, how Jesus bled when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so I thought to myself, no, you don't need to prove that to me because I believe that he's divine and he can do whatever he wants. But Lee offered a lot of medical explanations that in there. And I think, like you're saying, I think a lot of times people might try to do that just to maybe appeal to people who want a naturalistic explanation for everything.
Yeah, that's obviously an appeal to that. But I think the greater story or the greater question is, are we reading the story correctly, that we might be exegeting it correctly? Because even with excellent exegesis, if we've got the context off, our exegesis will be off. And we have no choice about that. So I've put the link to that paper in the private chat for you there. And I also put it for anyone else who might be interested, which there probably won't be very many, because wow, that's boring.
I don't know. I think a lot of the people, especially like Slam RN, I think she gets into stuff like this.
She might appreciate it then. Okay.
I just put it into the chat so you guys can go
well,
ahead and.
Then that's two of us that have done that.
Oh, you put it in the chat. You put it in the private chat. So I put it in the public chat.
I put it in the public chat as well.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool.
Yeah. But anyway, it's there if anyone's interested. And I am very interested in serious, hard, and skeptical review of this. I'm very interested in that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Excellent. That's perfect. Yeah. So I'll take a look at that because I think learning more about that. I'd also like to learn more. Another story that I have looked into the book of Job. I have spent a lot of time looking into the book of Job. So that's one I have focused on because the atheists.
Why Job?
The atheists. That's why the atheists are always bringing up Job, like he was just so mistreated and all that kind of stuff. And I see it differently when I look at that. I see it differently when I look at it because I see Job as being rather self. God gives us all these tests and things like that. I think one of the reasons why God took away Job's things is because Job had this self-righteous tendency, and it came out, and his three friends were telling him it, and then finally Elihu came in, and God scolded the three friends for saying that to him, but he never scolded Elihu. So I think that Job had to, had a little chip that needed to be, rubbed down.
Off his shoulder. Yeah, quite possibly. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah. The other book that I think would be really interesting to dig into pretty deeply is Genesis, because I think that's another one that Christians disagree so much on, Genesis 1-11.
Well, I would love to say something real quick about that before you close this down.
Yeah, sure.
The reason that we have to postulate dark energy and dark matter is because we see things in a gravitational model that don't make sense in reality and can't be justified by the gravity itself unless there's a lot more mass than we can see and a lot more energy than we can detect. So we postulate that by necessity, but there's a simpler explanation proposed actually prior to the gravitational model explaining everything. And that would be an energetic model where electrical energetic differentials and transfers of energy cause certain effects. And few people are aware of or take seriously what is now becoming, I think, undeniable in science, that what we're witnessing in the Box galaxy and in spiral galaxies having jets at the north and south poles, and that that quasar's north is pointing at another quasar's south, and its north is pointing at another quasar's south, and they're like a string of pearls along a chain. What we're seeing is an energetic transfer, and if you applied that everywhere, it has a lot of explanatory power. And one of the things that it would explain is the creation of galaxies. But if the energy transfer or electric universe is what it's colloquially called, theory is true, if it's true, and it is gaining foothold, whether people like it or not, but then science moves forward one funeral at a time. If it's true, then Genesis is perfectly accurate to how this would have formed, because in energetic transfer through a nebula cloud, the first thing that would happen is ionization of the particles, which would then start to emit photons, let there be light. It would exactly happen in that order. There'd be no sun and there'd be light.
Interesting. Yeah, I had Sal Cardova on my channel, and he was talking about that the Big Bang is coming under fire a little bit. And he said in 2019, something having to do with dark matter, that they were questioning that. And so that's kind of consistent with what you're saying. And again, that is not my field. I know so little about that. It's embarrassing.
Well, the Bible itself led me on a course of study that has resulted in 0 dead ends. That alone is odd,
Mm-hmm.
When it suggests something and I say, well, wait a minute, what would be the repercussions of that? And I go and look at NASA.gov and NCBI. And I mean, it's not Joe's fly-by-night website that I'm looking at. These things are true in reality. And that's why I accept the Bible as an authority.
Wow. You should probably write a book. Sounds like
I've started. First, there's this paper.
Yes.
Tell me what you think
John
of that.
says it's 153 pages.
It's only 153 pages, and most of it's citation.
That's like book size. Oh, most of it's citation? I like that kind of paper.
Yeah, it's mostly citations. So I mean, 1 Samuel 6:23 through 8:4 is not, that's not a lot. Or I'm sorry, 6:23 through 8:4 it's not a lot.
Mm-mm.
But I took the time and trouble to look up every definition of every word that wasn't a conjunction. I took the time to include some colored pictures, but all the information from NASA.gov, etc., to confirm this, from Gesenius and Strong's to confirm this as a way that it could be read, although not traditional.
That sounds interesting. I'll definitely look at that. That sounds like a lot of fun. So, well, good.
Well, I appreciate your time, Dr. Thomason, and thank you so much for letting me on for a minute. And you were just absolutely lovely. Thank you for that.
Oh, wait, before you go, how can people find you?
Well, this name here, Demolish_Doctrine, is my YouTube channel. And the name Richard Madsen will definitely make you see this symbol, this icon here, which I take directly from chapter 4 of the book of Revelation, a description of heaven. And that's what that icon is.
Oh, wow. Nice.
It's an underview of chapter 4, as if we were looking up from the belly.
Huh. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I will add your channel into my description as one of my, my go-tos, because I have a whole bunch of channels on my description. So I just keep copying and pasting when I create a new video. So I'll add that as one of the go-tos. So,
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's a very nice endorsement for someone who's known me as little as you have. That's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries at all. So, well, thank you for coming on. So everybody, please go ahead and like and subscribe to Demolish Doctrine's channel too. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the description. And whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you. Thank you for coming on Demolish Doctrine. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.